All right, the truth about why there are no conservative women. The truth about conservative women is that there are no conservative women. Now, before we begin, I want to make a couple things clear. I'm not making a moral argument here. I'm not saying what should or shouldn't be. I'm just pointing out what I see as a fundamental contradiction with the idea of conservative women. Now, before we get started, it might also be helpful to provide a bit of a definition for what conservative actually means. So I'm not talking about conservative in the way that CNN means it, low taxes and so on. I mean respect for hierarchy, valuing tradition, and so on, right? The idea that there are hierarchies as part of natural law, and that things like community, church, and so on are valuable, and that hierarchy is a natural, functional, stabilizing, even sacred uh, mechanism in human affairs. All right, so first of all, let's talk about feminism, right? Feminism is based on egalitarian universalism, right? So this is equality under the law, equal moral status. It does require skepticism of hierarchy, and it's fundamentally left liberal, okay? As I was saying before, the right wing does see hierarchy as natural and functional, all right? The second thing about feminism is that it sees gender as a power system or a social construct, right? And this is enforced by institutions. This particular idea that gender is a power system is based on structural analysis. You might also have heard this called critical theory, right? But it's a way of basically denigrating hierarchy and tradition. All right. So the results of this are leftist policy in general. Things like anti-discrimination laws, civil rights, equal pay, and other regulations enforcing certain kinds of equality, like, employee quotas and so on, right? It also requires state-backed childcare, parental leave, and reproductive autonomy, which fundamentally means abortion access, right? If women are equal in all of these ways, then you have to give them the ability to kill their children in the womb so that they don't have to deal with it, all right? Now, all of this requires the expansion of state power via legal interventions, and DEI-style institutional reforms, diversity, equity, and inclusion. All of this is fundamentally a left or liberal toolkit, right? It requires the state plus law plus regulations as the enforcement mechanism of all of this. Now, it's all aligned with left and liberal coalitions fundamentally. Progressive parties, labor, left wing, reform movements, civil rights frameworks, as well as academic and social theories. Okay? Now, necessarily all of this stuff views tradition as suspect, okay? The right respects tradition. The left sees tradition as the camouflage of domination, right? And so what that is looking for is the emancipation of the historical social order. Now I'm going to pause here for 1 minute. The United States is approximately 250 years old. For 150 of those years, women did not have the right to vote. This country was founded as a constitutional republic in which only men had the right to vote. Okay? So fundamentally, there's nothing conservative about the 19th Amendment about women's suffrage. All right. Now, radical feminism, or feminism in general, always moves to the left. It never moves to the right. Okay, so you started out with liberal feminism. This is basically enforced equality versus the law. Then you had social feminism, which sees gender oppression as being systemic. And then you had radical feminism, which sees the patriarchy fundamentally as the domination of women. All right, now, true, or what I'm calling thick conservative, means accepting masculine leadership, right? So equality is fundamentally an inversion under true or thick conservatism for all the reasons that we just talked about, okay? Women directly benefit from liberalism. And even modern conservatism in general rides on what I'm going to call liberal infrastructure. Okay. The incentive for women now is to favor mobility and bargaining power. This is bargaining power in the courts, things like alimony, child support, and so on, right? As well as gimme that's from the state. Okay, so a ton of single mothers are on, welfare programs and so on. They're using state education as childcare so that they can go and work, very often for a man. Okay, but this whole idea leads to the notion that conservative women are fundamentally performative. Okay, what they're saying is that I like conservative values, but they don't want to accept the power asymmetry that comes along with that comes along with hierarchy, that comes along with tradition, and so on. Okay, so they want freedom, but they're cosplaying as conservative. They're wearing it as a church hat or a costume on some level. Now let's stop here for 1 second, and I just want to say that the Bible has a number of passages, most famously 2 Timothy, I believe it's 23 and 24, right, where it talks about how women are not allowed to have authority over men in the church and so on. This is fundamentally an inversion. Now, personally, I am not religious, but I'm just telling you that there are at least half a dozen places in the Bible that I can think of where it says that women should not have authority over men, right? And it talks about the way that women should behave, and it's very different from how most women who are cosplaying conservative, it's very different from how they behave, because they do not accept masculine authority in practice, right? And leadership means the final say. It means spiritual authority, and yes, to some degree, it means obedience. Okay, so they want symbolic conservatism versus enforceable. Okay, now the state is always the fallback husband. Even if a woman supports the patriarchy rhetorically, the fallback mechanisms are left liberal state intervention, fundamentally. Okay, so they want autonomy because this is much more convenient than duty, right? Duty requires all kinds of sacrifice and so on, and this idea of sacrifice is very much sacrifice for the greater good, for the community, and so on some level is right-wing. Whereas this idea of autonomy, of individual freedom, everyone should just do what they want. Follow your heart, man. This is how hippies think, okay? This whole notion of pure individuality is actually fundamentally left and liberal. All right, now, lest anyone think that I'm being sexist or misogynistic, the next video is probably going to be about how there are no conservative men, or very few conservative men anymore. And this is because I think for all of these reasons, right, ever since women had the ability to vote, I believe that our society has become fundamentally feminized and emasculated. And the vast majority of men don't actually realize how feminized they've become by virtue of how feminized the society is in general. So, like this and subscribe if you liked it. Hit the other button if you didn't. Let me know what you think in the comments or on X, and we'll see you in the next video.